Now they know this about you. The secret conversation they overheard just went viral. Something unexpected has been traveling from one conversation to another, and somehow your name keeps finding its way into the center of it. Not because you demanded attention, not because you tried to prove anything. It happened quietly, almost by accident. A few words were spoken when they thought nobody important was listening. A thought was shared. An observation was made. Then someone repeated it to another person. Before long, what began as a private exchange started moving through circles you never even knew existed. The surprising part is not that people are talking. The surprising part is what they finally understand. For a long time, many people looked at you through assumptions. They thought they had you figured out. They believed they understood your story after seeing only a small chapter of it. But now something has shifted, and the image they carried in their minds is beginning to crack open. The conversation that changed everything was not dramatic. There were no grand speeches, no public announcements, no moment designed to attract attention. It was simple, honest, human. Someone spoke about the way you handled a difficult season when nobody was applauding. Someone mentioned how you continued showing kindness even when life gave you every reason to become bitter. Another person added details they had noticed from a distance. Piece by piece, a picture emerged that was impossible to ignore. Suddenly, people realized there was much more happening beneath the surface than they had ever understood. Stay with this, because there is something important here. What they discovered was not a secret you intentionally hid. It was a truth that could only be seen by those willing to look deeper. You may not even realize how much you've changed over time. Growth often happens so slowly that the person experiencing it barely notices. Day after day, you carried responsibilities, disappointments, hopes, and unanswered questions. Some days felt productive, other days felt confusing. Yet through it all, something inside you kept developing. A quiet strength was forming. The kind of strength that does not need to announce itself. The kind that appears in small decisions, patient moments, and choices nobody celebrates. While you were focused on simply getting through life, others were unknowingly watching. They noticed how you responded when things did not go your way. They noticed the calmness you carried after storms that would have broken someone else. And now those observations are becoming part of conversations that continue long after you leave the room. There is an interesting energy surrounding this realization. It feels less like gossip and more like awakening. People are beginning to understand that your story cannot be measured by appearances alone. They are discovering layers they never expected to find. Some feel inspired, some feel curious. Others are quietly reflecting on their own lives because of what they have learned from yours. The strange thing is that none of this happened because you chased recognition. It happened because authenticity leaves a trail that eventually becomes impossible to ignore. And as these conversations continue spreading from person to person, a new understanding is taking shape. They know something about you now that they did not know before, and this realization is only the beginning of a much bigger story. What makes this moment so fascinating is that the people discussing you are not focused on what you own, where you have been, or how impressive you appear from the outside. The topic that keeps resurfacing is something far less visible. It is the way you carry yourself when nobody is paying attention. Someone recently described you in a way that caught everyone off guard. They said that you seem to have a quiet ability to keep moving forward, even when life becomes uncertain. The room reportedly fell silent for a moment because the statement felt true. One person nodded. Another shared their own experience. Then another. Before long, the conversation transformed into something none of them expected. It stopped being about a single event and became about the kind of person you have gradually become. Many people never realize the impact they leave behind after ordinary interactions. They assume that if a moment feels small to them, it must feel small to everyone else. But that is rarely how life works. Sometimes a simple act of patience stays in someone's memory for years. Sometimes a few encouraging words arrive at exactly the right time and become impossible to forget. The people speaking about you are beginning to connect those moments together. They are remembering things they once overlooked. Tiny details, brief encounters, small gestures. On their own, they seemed insignificant. Together, they reveal a pattern. There is something important here. The pattern shows consistency, and consistency is difficult to fake. It is one of the reasons their perception of you is changing so dramatically. What they overheard and repeated was not a secret about your past. It was a realization about your character. Someone pointed out that while others often seek attention, you seem more focused on growth. While some people become discouraged when recognition does not arrive immediately, you have continued building your life one step at a time. That observation spread quickly because it resonated with people who had witnessed similar things themselves. Suddenly, stories began surfacing from different places and different times. Individuals who barely knew one another found themselves describing the same qualities. Without planning it, they started confirming a truth that had been quietly present all along. The more they talked, the clearer it became that what they admired was not perfection. It was perseverance. As these conversations continue, another realization is beginning to emerge. People are recognizing that some of the most meaningful transformations happen in silence. They happen away from cameras, applause, and public validation. You may have spent seasons wondering whether anyone noticed the effort, the healing, or the lessons you were learning along the way. The answer is more complicated than you think. Many did not notice at first, but now they do. And what they see is creating a ripple effect that continues to spread. Don't miss what comes next, because the story is moving beyond simple recognition. The people who once thought they understood you are beginning to see an entirely different picture, and that picture is revealing something powerful about the journey you have been living all along. A remarkable shift happens when people stop talking about what someone has done and start talking about who that person truly is. That is exactly where these conversations seem to be heading now. The focus is no longer on isolated moments or individual stories. Instead, people are beginning to notice the deeper thread connecting everything together. They are realizing that your presence has affected others in ways that were never obvious at first glance. Someone recently expressed it in a simple sentence that stayed with everyone who heard it. They said that being around you often makes people feel understood without needing to explain themselves. It was not a dramatic statement, yet it carried weight because so many people instantly recognized its truth. Suddenly, the discussion became much more personal. What makes this realization so meaningful is that it reflects something many people search for, but rarely find. In a world where everyone seems to be rushing to be heard, there is something powerful about someone who genuinely listens. Perhaps you never thought much about it. Perhaps you believed you were simply being yourself. Yet the people talking about you have started connecting moments they once considered unrelated. They remember conversations that left them feeling lighter. They remember times when your calm perspective helped them see a situation differently. They remember feeling accepted during moments when they expected judgment. These memories are surfacing one after another, creating a picture far richer than anyone anticipated. Stay with this, because the deeper meaning is only now beginning to emerge. There is also another layer to what is happening. Some of the people hearing these stories are realizing they misunderstood you in the past. Not because they intended to, but because they only saw fragments of your journey. Human beings often build opinions using incomplete information. We see one chapter and assume we know the entire book. Yet as more conversations unfold, those old assumptions are quietly fading away. People are discovering that many of the qualities they admire most about you were present long before they noticed them. The patience, the resilience, the willingness to keep showing up even during uncertain seasons. None of these traits appeared overnight. They were built through experiences that few people fully understood at the time. Now those hidden chapters are beginning to make sense. What makes all of this feel almost mysterious is how naturally it has happened. Nobody organized it. Nobody planned it. There was no effort to shape a certain image or create a specific impression. Instead, the truth simply found its way to the surface through honest conversations. And with each new story that gets shared, people are becoming more curious about the person they thought they already knew. They are beginning to understand that your journey has carried a depth they never recognized before. More importantly, they are realizing that your influence was never about being the loudest voice in the room. It was about something quieter and far more lasting. As that understanding continues to spread, an even bigger realization is waiting just ahead, one that will cause many people to look at you in a completely different light. There comes a point when a story grows beyond the people who first shared it, and that is exactly what seems to be happening now. The conversation that began with a few observations has evolved into something much larger. New people are hearing about you, not because anyone is trying to place you on a pedestal, but because the qualities being discussed feel increasingly rare. Someone mentions your name, and instead of the conversation ending there, others begin adding their own experiences. What started as a single perspective has become a collection of voices, each carrying a different piece of the same truth. The remarkable thing is how similar those pieces are. Even when people describe completely different situations, they often arrive at the same conclusion. They talk about your ability to remain genuine in a world that constantly encourages people to wear masks. As these stories continue circulating, something unexpected is happening inside the people listening. They are not only learning about you, they are also learning about themselves. Your journey has become a mirror in ways nobody anticipated. Some are reflecting on opportunities they almost gave up on. Others are thinking about relationships they neglected or dreams they placed on hold. The reason is simple. Authentic growth has a way of reminding people what is possible. There is something important here. The qualities they admire in you are awakening questions within their own hearts. They are beginning to ask themselves whether they have been living as honestly, as patiently, or as courageously as they could. Without intending to, your example has sparked reflection far beyond your immediate circle. What many of them still do not fully understand is that your growth was never effortless. They see the strength now, but they did not always witness the moments that created it. They were not there for every uncertainty, every quiet struggle, every period of waiting when answers seemed distant. Yet somehow, traces of those experiences can still be felt in the way you move through life today. People are beginning to recognize that your calmness was earned, your wisdom was earned, your perspective was earned. These are not qualities that appeared out of nowhere. They were shaped through time, patience, and a willingness to keep moving forward even when progress felt invisible. The more people understand this, the more respect begins to replace the assumptions they once carried. And now another layer of the story is starting to reveal itself. The conversation is no longer centered on what others think of you. It is becoming about what your journey represents. People are discovering that real transformation rarely announces itself while it is happening. It grows quietly beneath the surface until one day its impact becomes impossible to ignore. That is where things stand now. The realization spreading through these conversations is not simply that you have changed. It is that your growth has left a mark on people who never expected to be affected by it. Don't miss what comes next, because the most meaningful part of this story is still unfolding, and it may explain why these conversations continue gaining momentum long after they should have faded away. What few people expected is that the deeper these conversations go, the less they become about recognition, and the more they become about connection. Somewhere along the way, people stopped asking, what happened to them, and started asking, how did they become this person? That question has been moving quietly through different circles, carrying with it a sense of curiosity that feels sincere rather than intrusive. The answers are never exactly the same, yet they all point toward a similar truth. You did not become who you are through a single breakthrough moment. You became who you are through countless ordinary days, when you kept choosing growth over bitterness, patience over frustration, and hope over discouragement. Those choices may have seemed invisible at the time, but they left an imprint that others are only now beginning to understand. One of the most interesting parts of this entire story is how many people are realizing that they underestimated the influence of quiet actions. The world often celebrates dramatic achievements, but lasting impact usually begins in much smaller ways. A thoughtful conversation, a moment of understanding, a decision to remain kind when it would have been easier not to. These are the things people keep mentioning when your name comes up, not because they are trying to create an ideal image, but because those moments stayed with them long after they happened. Stay with this, because the heart of the message is found here. What people remember most is rarely what impresses them. It is what makes them feel seen, valued, and understood. Somehow, your journey has carried more of that influence than you may have ever realized. There is also a growing awareness that your path has inspired people in ways you never witnessed firsthand. Some listeners have admitted that hearing these stories encouraged them to keep going through challenges of their own. Others have quietly decided to approach life differently after reflecting on the qualities being described. None of this happened through grand speeches or carefully planned lessons. It happened naturally. The energy surrounding these conversations feels almost like a chain reaction of understanding. One realization leads to another. One memory unlocks another memory. One perspective helps someone see something they had overlooked for years. In a subtle way, your story has become larger than your own experience because it is now touching the lives of people who are finding pieces of themselves within it. As this momentum continues, an even clearer picture is beginning to emerge. People are realizing that what makes someone memorable is not perfection, popularity, or constant success. It is authenticity. It is the willingness to remain true to who they are while continuing to grow. That realization is spreading further with every conversation. The secret discussion that once felt small now carries a meaning nobody anticipated. It has become a reminder that genuine character eventually reveals itself, even when nobody is trying to prove anything. And as more people come to understand this truth about you, a final realization is approaching, one that brings everything together and reveals why these conversations have resonated so deeply with everyone who has heard them. The most meaningful truth often arrives quietly, and that is how this story reaches its final chapter. After all the conversations, shared memories, and unexpected realizations, people are beginning to understand something that cannot easily be explained with a single sentence. What they discovered about you was never hidden. It was simply waiting to be recognized. For a long time, your growth happened away from the spotlight. Your lessons were learned in ordinary moments. Your strength developed through experiences that rarely received attention. Yet now, as different voices continue reflecting on what they have observed, a common understanding has emerged. They see someone who kept becoming a better version of themselves without needing constant validation along the way. When people first heard these stories, many expected to uncover some dramatic secret. Instead, they found something far more meaningful. They found evidence of consistency. They found proof that character is built through everyday choices rather than extraordinary events. The realization surprised them because it challenged what they thought mattered most. In a world that often rewards appearances, they found themselves talking about sincerity. In a culture that frequently celebrates noise, they found themselves appreciating quiet strength. There is something important here. The reason these conversations spread so naturally is because they touched on something deeply human. Everyone longs to believe that authenticity still matters, and your story reminded them that it does. Perhaps the greatest lesson hidden inside all of this is that influence is rarely measured by how many people notice you in a moment. It is measured by how many people remember the way you made them feel long afterward. The people discussing you may come from different places, carry different experiences, and see the world through different perspectives, yet many arrived at the same conclusion. They remember your presence. They remember your patience. They remember your ability to remain grounded while continuing to evolve. Those memories became conversations. Those conversations became realizations. And those realizations created a ripple effect that traveled much farther than anyone expected. What began as a simple exchange of thoughts eventually revealed a truth that had been quietly growing all along. So if there is one thing to take with you from this message, let it be this. You do not always see the impact of your own journey while you are living it. Many of the most meaningful parts happen beneath the surface, beyond your awareness, touching lives in ways you may never fully know. The conversation that went viral was never really about attention. It was about recognition. It was about people finally seeing something that had been present all along. And now that they see it, they cannot unsee it. Not because you became someone different overnight, but because the person you have been becoming for so long is finally visible. Let that thought settle gently in your heart. Continue your path with the same quiet confidence, the same sincerity, and the same openness to growth. The story was never about proving yourself to the world. It was about becoming yourself, and that is exactly what people have finally come to understand.